We really appreciate you guys coming to our first Lunch and Learn as CCG Capital, which is very exciting. And I am Tibet Stewart. I'm the Director of Marketing and Business Development at CCG Capital. And our first speaker today that's going to present is Paul DiGiuseppe. DiGiuseppe. And
Got it.
DiGiuseppe. And he is the principal planner with CodeNEXT and with the City of Austin Planning and Zoning Department. So he's going to talk to us just about what CodeNEXT is and how it affects all of us. Basically, you know, they're in the planning phase of it right now, and what ends up happening with, you know, the revisions to all the codes will affect all of us that live in Austin and just how we live and interact with the city. So he's going to give us an overview and then take any feedback that anyone has for any of it. So this is Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I really appreciate being here. You know, as Tibet mentioned, this is what we're working on with CodeNEXT is a really important initiative. And while a lot of this stuff can be pretty wonky, I mean, dealing with city codes, land development regulations, they actually do have an effect on all of us from how we live. You know, if you're able to get in your car and go somewhere, that's land development regulations. If you're able to walk to the grocery store, walk to get ice cream, or if you can't do it, those are land development regulations. And you know, I realize that you all are primarily involved in real estate investment. I was hoping one of our advisory group members, Terry Mitchell, would be here because he has a lot of experience in that field. I do not, so I'm really interested though in hearing what you have to say because we're more interested in the feedback that you all give us. I know I'm going to be talking a bit in the beginning. I hope I can get through this quickly and really open it up for questions that you all have, because what we're going to be doing is going to be changing the game, and we need people who are involved in this from various aspects, certainly in real estate and real estate investment, to be involved in the developing process. Make sure we get it right, because at the end of the day, we want a code that works right for everybody. We want to be able to roll out a code that says, we're flexible in development and it helps with investment. And, so with that, I'm going to start. Much of what I have is pretty general and straightforward. I'm curious, how many of you are familiar with the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan? Great, a couple of you are. Good, because I want to talk about how CodeNEXT actually comes directly out of the comp plan. So it's really important first to talk about what the comprehensive plan seeks to do, and then CodeNEXT's role in helping to make that happen. So now the first question though is why? Why are we even doing all this? Why did we even do a comprehensive plan? Why are we looking at changing our land development regulations? And then there's a whole host of other things the city's doing. Well, no surprise, right? We're a rapidly growing city. In fact, now we're the 11th largest city in the United States. Our population, this is a little outdated. We just hit 915,000 people, or we're expected to. So we are rapidly growing. And as you can see, over the years, we've essentially doubled in population every 25 to 30 years. So it's Austin, since its founding as the Republic, has essentially doubled every 25 to 30 years. With that, though, we have to keep up. Technology needs to keep up, our policies need to keep up, and our regulations need to keep up. And the challenge has been that our regulations that are in place largely come out of the 1980s. Very different time, very different place that Austin was back then. And some of that has led to some of the challenges we see throughout the city, is a code that has not kept up with the times. So with Imagine Austin, when it was adopted in 2012, there were a lot of things that said that as a community that came together that helped to create the plan, we said that there were a lot of things that needed to change. And kind of as a snapshot of it, the plan talks about this idea of what we call complete communities, which is creating communities that work for all of us. the places where we can get our daily needs within a short distance of where we live and work, and realizing that all these places are different. Our needs, all of us have different needs, and what we need to try to have are places that work for us. Whether you're single, you have kids, you're elderly, you're a college student, you're recently graduated from college, we're trying to create places that are more convenient for all of us. And in doing so, looking at the relationship between how land is used and transportation as well. And there's certainly environmental components to this. Certainly, Austin is a very environmentally conscientious city, so how do we protect natural resources? As well as when you look out here, right, you see trees, you see landscaping. How do we take nature and put it back into an urban environment like this? So this is important because that sets the framework for what we're trying to do with our code. So I imagine most of you are probably familiar with what a land development code does. And simply, these are the regulations. Imagine Austin's the plan. These are the regulations, and it tells us what can be built, where it can be built, and how much of it can be built. So it dictates the form, the use. You know, you look out the window, this was built to code. This was built under city regulations. Or think of if you live in the city of Austin, it was built to city, your neighborhood was built to city regulations. So this is a real important tool in the toolbox. Now there's a handful of other tools that a city has at its disposal. We invest revenue, right, from property taxes, sales taxes, bonds that get approved. So the city, like you all, we invest as well. That's one of the things the city has as a tool. We can form partnerships. I know you all are kind of a partnership, but city does it as well. We partner with nonprofits, other cities, universities, so forth. But one of the big tools we have is our ability to regulate, and that's where CodeNEXT fits in. So imagine Austin is a very broad, comprehensive plan. We're looking at primarily the built-in natural environment, but it also affects other things like, you know, we hear it seems like almost every day about household affordability, that we're getting more and more expensive. And I'm sure you all as investors are probably seeing that. We are looking also at different regulations can also affect the built environment. Regulations can affect even our economy. You know, how easy is it to get a permit to build a building like this? You know, where should it go? Is it in an area where a business needs to be, right? Location, location, location. We need to look at our regulations to see, does that align with the market? So again, the regulations play an important, crucial part of cities' ability to grow, to change, to be a place that works for everybody. So why are we revising it? There was a study done a couple years ago by our consultant and found that there are a lot of problems with it. The code is very difficult to understand, very difficult to administer. And in fact, have any of you heard of the Zucker report? Okay, a few of you have. The Zucker report was a study done that looked at the city's backlog problems and permitting problems, and it has couple hundred recommendations for how to fix it. So that stuff has been wrapped into some of the things that we're going to do moving forward to try to address. So one of the things they talked about was it's just a difficult code to figure out. It's 4 volumes. Sometimes you have to look in 4 places to figure out what your building height is if you're trying to build. It's very complex. It's very complicated. It's also very unpredictable, because it could be a myriad of things that could be built, and it's not, you know, a project can go forward and you take a second project and you go with this very similar, and the outcomes could be different going through the city process. So we're trying to, you know, that's a problem. And then again, this code was essentially, much of it was written in the 1980s. Well, now we have a new comprehensive plan that's come out in the last few years that was very much based on public input. So we need to look at our current codes to see, do they now align with the current thinking in Austin? And our current code really was reflective of a very auto-centric, drivable culture that was what we saw in this country back in the 70s and 80s. It was about how easy is it to get, it doesn't matter where the house is built, we'll just drive to where we need to go. But Austin today is a different place. People are saying they want more convenient places and walkable. So what we're looking at is to fix the problems, the major problems that we've seen in the code that were identified, and be more streamlined. You know, if you're the right project and you in the right place and the code meets, it should be a lot quicker to get an approval and get going to get it built and then get your certificate of occupancy. The process needs to be predictable. You should be able to, not only just you, but the public, the neighbors around the area should be able to go, okay, you're coming in, the property is zoned this, we have a good idea of what this should end up looking like, the building heights, the setbacks, where the trees will go, and making it predictable. And then finally, one of our tasks is making sure it aligns with our comp plan. The comp plan says these, we're looking for more walking friendly places to balance off the drive friendly places. And we have to be able to document that. So I talk about these walkable or compact and connected places, and what does that mean? Well, there's a lot of implications in it, but it's something I think we all intuitively know. Again, it's the idea of having the uses more closely or closer to you if that's what you desire. So again, if you want to have the coffee bar or the tavern or some place that's important to you nearby, then our code should be looking at how can we make that happen in a way that's supportive of the community and not done in a way that puts a use in a place where it shouldn't be, where it could hurt the neighborhood. So with that, we're looking at not only the placement of uses and the types of uses, but also we're looking at new street regulations that include sidewalk widths and the street widths and trying to align how streets really coordinate with our neighborhoods. For example, if you're in a neighborhood, having a narrow street is probably preferable to one that's, could accommodate 4 lanes of traffic, which a lot of our neighborhoods have. We're also looking at diversifying our housing stock and our typology, what we call the typologies. Austin typically has, making a generalization, but single family homes with yards and big apartment complexes. And what we're trying to do is to look at our regulations to see how we can incorporate other types of residential uses, more garage apartments, more triplexes and quads, and designed in a way that can fit into neighborhoods. So that way we can diversify the price points and give opportunities for more affordability. Now, I'm not saying that it will be affordable by standards, but if we can do what we can to increase the supply and increase the supply of different types of housing, then we have a shot at least making an impact on affordability. So not all the price points, if you build a subdivision and every house is essentially the same, well, you don't have a diversity in price points. But if you build a new subdivision and you put in granny flats or garage apartments, at least you now open up opportunities for a more affordable option. And then finally, we're trying to focus growth in the most appropriate areas. Again, our goal is to help preserve and support our neighborhoods. So where should the growth go? We're growing rapidly. We're still growing at 110 people a day moving into Central Texas. So our comprehensive plan essentially said, the growth should be focused on certain areas, our main roadways, our big corridors, and centers like this. We're really in a center. The Arboretum is when you looked on the map, it's at what we call an activity center. So how could we accommodate more in places like this? But in addition, when we look at certain neighborhoods, are there opportunities for neighborhood-friendly housing like a granny flat or garage apartments to go in? So it's not just development all over the place. It's trying to build it in the right place that's supportive of the whole community and just makes it an even better place. And I'm going to get through this quickly, I promise. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to change our code itself to be more focused on the form of buildings Our current code is more concerned about the use with some aspects of form, but what we're trying to do is more toward standards in which you could actually look at the code and go, I see if I build in this district, this zoning district, these are the range of options that we would have available to us. And bringing more of an Austinized form rather than one that could be in any other city in the country. So we're working to look at what's the DNA of our neighborhoods and our communities like this and build a code that shapes that. Primarily because all different places really need different regulations. I think it's, you might have two very different neighborhoods have the same zoning, and under our current regulations, they're treated the same. That's one reason you see, you might see a tear down happen and something that comes up and you look at it and go, well, this isn't in the context of this neighborhood. And so what we're looking at are creating regulations that are more streamlined, but also ones that create something that fits more in the form of the existing areas, with the hopes that it supports the area, and in doing so we'll get neighborhoods to help support it as well, rather than, we think our current regulations leads to a lot of the fighting that occurs because people see these big projects that get built and you go, how did this fit in? So almost at the end, we have some milestones coming up. And I think this is certainly something where we really want you all to weigh in on. We are in the coming year are going to be working on what we call code prescriptions. And what those are they are a number of they're papers and outreach activities that we're going to have that focus on some major topic areas like affordability and like our built-in natural environment, that we need the community, we need you all to weigh in on, to tell us, are we in the right direction? Because these papers are going to be us telling the community, this is when the code gets released next year, this is how we're going to approach addressing this particular topic. So it's really important for you all to be able to tell us things, I don't know, what might be a goal that's important for you all as investors. These will be great opportunities for you all to react to and tell us, this works, and we really want to hear when it works, and we really want to hear when you think it doesn't work, what the ideas coming out of these prescriptions are. So those will be coming out, and then, oh yes?
Okay, can you go back to your screen?
Sure.
Okay, you got the outline of when those topics will be coming up. My question would be, where do you guys meet at, or to meet to, bring up the agenda?
Okay, that's actually the next slide. And I'm gonna go right to that because we have a lot of different ways that we're going to meet with people. We have a code advisory group that meets more than monthly now, and they're going to be focusing their meetings now, starting in March, on these prescriptions. We're also wanting to get out. Engagement works going out into the community. I'm certainly going to be available to coordinate our team to go out. So if we have, work with, your group, your business, whomever, we want to go out and meet with folks because we know people can't always go to a meeting. And so it's us taking it out to you all. So that's an important thing. We'll also have the ability to go online for people to provide us feedback on the papers online. In addition, we are going to schedule, for each of these different prescriptions, we're going to schedule a walk to talk about that theme. So for example, if we talk about affordability, we're going to go have a community walk and look at areas that have good examples of this type of housing that you don't see everywhere in the city. So I hope our outreach is sufficient and not just sufficient, but really convenient for you all, that if you think this is worthwhile, please let me know and we'll work on getting our team out to you but we also want you to come to us. It's really critical, too, for our code advisory group to hear different voices, particularly on these topics. Like anything with the city, there are people who are focused on different topic areas, but it's important to hear their voices as well as new voices. And the advisory group is, they were appointed by council, so council's going to really listen to what the advisory group says. So it's real important for the advisory group to hear from experts all across.
The reason why I was asking is like on that slide before,
Yeah.
you have one issue about household affordability. So my question really comes down to like, what is the average cost to live in Austin versus the percentage of people who make a certain income? And how do you include those people in that process? Because I think the vision is good, but it's still a thing that's gonna keep a segment of people outside the whole process, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's been a big concern of ours. How do we get renters to come in? We know most of our participants are homeowners, which, so we're trying to balance it, diversity across the board. And so that's why it's important for us to go out. As a city, we have to have meetings and whatnot, but where people come to the city, but it's also really important for us to come out. And in particular, too, like you mentioned affordability, we have to engage people who are in that group, who are low income or at risk of it, or even, not just low income, but middle income. A lot of us are struggling, and with the cost of living going up, it's really important. We're all being affected by it.
Yeah, and I didn't want to leave the elder staff out either. I'm saying like,
Right.
when you got medical concerns about affording to get your medication versus
Right.
paying for a bill.
Yeah, right, exactly. And what can we do to create communities that are more cost effective? It might not be affordable housing, but if you don't have to own a car, AAA did a national study. They do one every year, and I think recently their study said a car costs us on average about $9,000 a year to operate. So if you're low income or low middle class, if you can reduce your transportation costs, that's a pretty good savings. So those are the things, when we talk about complete communities, that's what we're trying to get to partly is cost savings. You mentioned health. And I know you were talking about getting prescriptions, but what if we created more walkable places where people can get more exercise? That's good for your cardiovascular system, your respiratory system. So we do have outreach and engagement goals of getting with a lot of different groups. But as staff, it's harder for us, and you all carry a lot of influence in your communities to help carry that message forward and get people communicating to us and telling us they want to stay involved and providing us with feedback is really crucial. This process doesn't work without it. And along those lines too, there's a number of ways to get in touch, to communicate online. My preference is always in person, by the way, but there are a large number of people who like to just communicate or largely communicate online. But we have Facebook, Twitter. Of course, if you just Google CodeNEXT, it'll pop up the website as well. And there's plenty of ways through that to be able to communicate with us. So with that, I really want to open it up and hear from you all and think about what changes are needed in order for you to be successful in achieving your goals. Yes?
I have a question. You showed the map of the city.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, places, some parts of town you kind of go into and you go, this area could use a little freshen up, or, like it needs a little revitalization, whereas other areas have already kind of been revitalized. So I'm just wondering, how do you decide what areas you're gonna focus on in terms of or is it, I know it's a holistic.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't have the answer to it yet. What we're doing right now is we're actually writing the code. So we need to write in for that diversity you're talking about. So we need to create new categories and keep good old ones that work. Then after we've written it, we then now have to map it. And that's going to be an important thing. So we're using we will use a number of different resources like this is what we call the growth concept map. We will look at current zoning, current conditions. We actually have done the public, most neighborhoods in Austin gave us great photos of their neighborhoods to tell us what the assets were, what needed changing. We need to look at all of that and then apply the right standard to it, because some areas might want change more than others, I guess is your question. So we have to make sure through a process, and a very public process it will be, for people to weigh in as well to help determine, what type of change. I don't know about how much, but what type. Because some communities, like we've heard from Dove Springs, they need a grocery store, they need medical help, health uses there. So what can we do to allow a place like Dove Springs meet its needs? We can create the regulations, and then hopefully that'll mean the market can go in and make it happen. Yes?
Could you maybe address some of the stigma around the words affordability
Sure.
and density, and how those can actually shift things for the code?
Yeah, we don't usually like the word density. It's a very loaded term. And density is only a component of a neighborhood, of a community. But it's one of those terms when you say density, I think people envision Manhattan. And that's okay. I mean, but it's trying to think in aspirational terms. That, there were great examples of neighborhoods that are more dense in reality than they look because there may be a triplex that's in the form of a single family house, just a larger one. So the form aspect of this code is really critical because we don't have it now, and we see a lot of the negative consequences of it. And so things like density can be wrapped into design and form, and as well as people thinking in more aspirational terms about what do we lack that we should have. Whereas today, when people talk about wanting a certain use, they may go, well, we want the use, but we don't want the zoning that goes with it, because then that allows for things we don't want, and it might look the way we don't want it to look. Affordability is another, that's a great term, because there is a federally designated definition for affordable housing, which obviously we want to meet and exceed, although we're struggling with it. But affordability is a relative term. I mean, if something's affordable to somebody, Westlake Hills is affordable to somebody. But what we're really talking about there too is a diversity of price points, as well as a diversity of the people who live there. I mean, this was something, again, we heard time and time again when we were developing Imagine Austin, that we want places that are diverse. People, age groups, cultures, all sorts of things. So, but when you're not affordable, your diversity shrinks along with it. And so we're going to try to make affordability, more options for affordability, whether it's the more traditional definition or market rate.
And you're saying the affordability is interspersed through neighbor sales?
I think that as an ideal, again, but a lot of that's going to be in the context of a place, the form, the uses and the form. There may be areas where that can't happen, but there may be areas we need to look at and have conversations with the community to go, okay, you're single family now, but what if you were allowed to convert to your garage to a garage apartment? So,
Well,
yeah.
the immediate thing that flashed to mind is that in a neighborhood has a different range of price points that you brought up. On the one side of it, the quote, affordable housing dilutes the square footage value of somebody that has a higher price point.
Okay.
On the other hand, that property increases the affordability level. And I'm wondering,
Yeah.
how are you going to change the tax code to take care of those people?
Well, my simple answer is we're not changing the tax code.
Ah, see.
No, right. I'm just being candid. I mean, we're not, we don't have the ability to do that. We're just looking at the regulations.
I'm imagining, okay, I want to go in and either flip a property or do a wreck out, build out in an existing. That makes it real difficult to try and target your structure and your clientele. Then.
Yeah, that's why I wish Terry were here to be able to answer that. But having gone through one of his presentations, he's made a great point about, the number of units can really affect price points. More, and I know there's some point you hit a ceiling where it stops, that stops to be the case. But in many cases, the more units you have, at least it allows you to drop price points. The taxing issue, I can't answer that. I don't know. But I'm gonna make, by the way, I'm making notes here. That's what I'm typing, because I need to make sure I get yours back.
You
But
got two people asking the same question from two polarized perspectives there about their taxes, so.
right, and we will be looking at other affordability programs. And this is not my area of expertise, but there could be things like community land trusts and where a nonprofit owns the land and there are homeowners, but they just own the building, so at least the land gets taken off their tax burden. So there are other tools we're going to look at to address it, but yeah, that first part, I wish I had the answer to it, but things are getting more expensive anyway. And if you're doing an upgrade to a property, you've brought it up at one point, but I get what you're saying. If you add more units, then the assessed value will go up more so with it. The hope is that if let's say, again, if you're looking at a garage apartment, you can offset that through rent, but I also realize that means rent goes up with it. But people rent in Hyde Park. It's expensive, but most of those people could never afford to live there. So a lot of this is going to come down to supply and demand. And I don't know offhand, what's the percentage of residential vacancy? How many units in Austin are
Like 4.
I'd heard like 3-4%.
Right, that's the vacancy rate.
So yeah, that's going to be it's going to be hard to address affordability with that rate. Yes.
It seems to me that a lot of development going on now is going on out in the periphery. New housing is going to Pflugerville and Leander, those areas. Most of what I see housing-wise in those areas is kind of monolithic subdivisions that go into an HOA kind of model where you can't add a mother-in-law suite or anything like that. Is the city of Austin coordinating with all of these surrounding communities, planning for the future? Because they're developing along a traditional 1980s model where you've got a big subdivision, everybody gets in their car and drives somewhere else.
I don't know how much we're doing that, but that is definitely something our comp plan said we needed to do. Before I came onto the CodeNEXT team, I was working on the implementation of the comp plan, and that was one of the things we started to look at. But that is absolutely a crucial issue because affordability, like transportation, it's not just the city, it's the region. And you're right, when you have a situation where it's all single family and you're paying an HOA, that creates affordability challenges. We on our end of it have to be able to create, more diversity of it, and start to shift the market back because, I don't know if it's still true today, but a growing percentage of housing and development is going on outside of the city. And, not only is that, thinking about affordability, people are still having to commute into the city. And so again, when you think about transportation costs, the longer you have to travel every day, the more your bills add up. And if you're moving to Pflugerville or Round Rock because you could afford a house, it doesn't take long before your commute costs eat up the savings than you would have had if you had invested and bought your house here. So that's a great point. I'm going to bring that back. I think we need to, I'll bring it back and see how we can start to elevate those conversations with those other cities and see if what they're willing to do. But on a whole, though, that what we're trying to do in Austin, what we can try to change will be the, creating more flexible options for housing and also commercial real estate as well.
Your development is also going to impact what you need in the way of highways and interconnectivity and,
Right.
Public transport and everything else.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, we look at MOPAC expansion, that's, the growth of trips on MOPAC, if I'm not mistaken, is really what's going on out in the suburbs, not downtown development. And the other thing is, the more compact we are as a community, it'll have a positive effect on traffic in that it could slow the increase. I mean, traffic is probably always going to increase unless technology and other things change. But if we're able to, I still have to commute to my job. Luckily, I can usually take the bus, but it would be nice not to have to get in my car to go shop, go to the coffee bar. But yeah, coordination with the county, the city, other cities, that's a big. What else? Well, yes, there and then there.
So is the idea ultimately that each neighborhood is going to have its own zoning and development code?
Well, it'll all be one code, but it'll be applied. We will be looking at each neighborhood to see how it's applied.
So it'll vary from neighborhood to neighborhood?
Well, we'll have a limited number of zoning categories. So we won't have, for example, the Hyde Park zoning category, the Cherrywood zoning category. What we're studying is the different types of communities. And I don't remember how many there are, but a lot of our communities are very similar. So what we're trying to do is group those similar communities and create one code for one zoning code or two, because things change, multiple, but we're looking at the context of those communities to see. But we're not going to have thousands of categories. Yes.
With the current code that's in place, there's the FAR, the 40%, and that really limits the footprint that you can put on a residential lot.
Right.
Or any lot, really, commercial, it doesn't matter. How is that going to increase or in this new, because with the supply, demand, affordability,
Yeah.
More units, bigger units?
Well, that's something we're going to have to look at. We don't know yet. Again, we're still developing the code standards, but again, looking at the context of an area, it's possible it'll change. That the floor to area ratio will change, impervious cover could change. So all of that's open. Again, we're looking at how do you do it in a way that's supportive of an existing area and accomplishing other goals as well. If you create walkability, we have to be able to look at distances between buildings and whatnot. Like, Tibet and I were talking earlier about, you're not that far from here over to the Arboretum, but nobody ever walks there. So, all of that's up. All of that's going to be for consideration. But want to make it clear too that as we're looking at these issues, certainly issues like flooding are at the forefront. We are not going to create, our goal is to actually have deal with flooding in a positive manner. And so, we're working with other departments like watershed protection to look at issues like flooding so that the new code doesn't make the problem worse. In fact, we're going to do what we can to make it even better. We want to look at, again, things like floor to area ratio and impervious cover are issues that a lot of people in our community take very seriously, and that's what they've known for decades. We want to create a code that leads to products, communities being built that people can really appreciate. And so we need to look at the different tools like the floor to area ratio and see what it can do. How can it be done in a way that works even better than it does now? So, and in accommodating, if we want to have more second units or, triplexes and whatnot, then there'll be trade-offs. that's going to be a big discussion for us going through this year, with a lot of the trade-offs that'll occur. Yeah.
I was
Yes.
just gonna see if you could talk about, like, for example, Miller, or Mueller, call it different things, but how that is maybe a good example of some of the objectives of Imagine Austin CodeNEXT, like why that would be a good model, or why it would not be, just kind of your thoughts on what
Yeah.
you accomplish there with the different types of housing and different price ranges.
Yeah, Miller is an example we'd like to show. The challenge with that, of course, is that city-owned land, and the city, you know, that certainly affected the land costs. But the ideas behind it are still there, that you can, you know, try to create places that can be diverse and have affordability and price points. And in integrating, you know, open space, parkland, and having, again, those commercial retail uses close to where people live. Be nice if our neighborhood had something like that. But yeah, use of examples is really important, because I know you had asked the question earlier about diversity and density and affordability, and words are one thing, but showing people illustrations of it, that, you know, Miller's a pretty and densely developed place, but you know, it's not a condo canyon like some places are. So as much as we have examples of density and affordability, you know, we'll get more support from people. Some people will use, again, the negative images of density and affordability, and, you know, we're trying to put us people, humans, into all of this. You know, affordability isn't just about a built environment. It's about people. People live there, and we should treat people with dignity and respect. And you know, so when we talk about density and affordability, we should be building places that everyone should be proud of. You know, so other questions, or am I at my limit?
I think you're at your limit, but we really
Okay.
appreciate answering so many questions.
And just want to, you know, again, make a plug that if you all want us to come out to your groups or whatnot, you have my information.
Yes,
I'll
I do.
be forwarding the PowerPoint to you, and we want to get out there.
And there's a ton of great information on their website about Imagine.
Website, please. I have austintexas.gov.
You can, if you just Google CodeNEXT, you'll find it. But I can put it back up here.
Just tell me what it is.
Yeah, it's a city. It's the Austin, Texas CodeNEXT. Yeah, I mean, it's austintexas.gov/CodeNEXT. That's what it is. But I promise you, if you Google it, it'll show up.
So yeah, there is a whole presentation about future outlook for the city and plans. So I encourage you to go there and give Paul any other feedback that you might have offline. So thank you,
Yeah.
Paul. Really
Thank you
appreciate
all.
it.